Hey everyone, and welcome back to another devlog for Polar. It is Monday morning and I've got a lot I want to work on this week, so we're going to jump right into development soon, but before we do that I want to walk you through a few things I implemented since the last video. The first thing I did was make some improvements to my polar bear character, specifically his walking animation. So if we start at the beginning here and move along the timeline, you can see he still kind of bounces back and forth as he did, but of course his leg bones are now rotating. I've also added a bit of a pause at the top of his little jump, and I think that gives his walk quite a bit of character. We'll hop over to Unity and see what that looks like. I was pleasantly surprised with this result. As you can see, just a little bit of extra work on his animation seems to give this otherwise basic polar bear quite a bit of character. It's a pretty sassy walk he's got there. I kind of love it. I also made a really nice change to the controls I worked on last week by introducing the ability to carry momentum between states. And I'll go ahead and show you what this looks like. Basically what this means is that you no longer snap directly between different velocities based on what state you should be in. Previously, if you exited the dash and you landed on the ground, you would immediately snap back to a walk speed. But now, when you finish the dash, you carry that momentum, and when you land, you slowly decelerate back towards the walk speed. That's also true if you slide. We can now slide with that higher velocity because we haven't decelerated yet. And when we get back up from the slide, we kind of move slowly back towards our desired walking pace. I think this just makes the gameplay a lot less rigid and quite a bit smoother, and it's going to be a lot more fun when we have a bunch of stuff to interact with in the scene. If you're curious how I achieved that, it was actually a pretty simple change in my walk state. I now have the notion of a desired walking speed, and in my block that gets called in fixed update here, I basically just check to see if the player is moving at that desired speed, and if not, we slowly lerp towards it. What this does is remove the responsibility of slowing down or speeding up from other states, meaning they can carry their momentum as they choose. Next up on the to-do list are going to be two pretty fun items, I think, both pickups and obstacles. Now, it's already pretty late in the morning and I got to get ready for work soon, but I'm going to try to crank out my first obstacle, which is really just going to be a platform for the bear to jump on. So, time to hop into Blender. So after not much time at all, we have our very first, very basic platform. And I'll go ahead and quickly walk you through how I brought this thing to life. Obviously, it started out as a basic cube in Blender. All I did was shrink it down on the Z-axis and apply some imperfections to it, but of course, I'll be revisiting this piece of artwork quite a lot in the future. Now, I made a platform prefab out of this piece of art, and I added a box collider and a rigid body. This was just so that I could obviously set up the collider for the object and give it the same material as my ground so that the player can kind of walk across it as I would expect. Hopping back over to the scene view here, it should be pretty clear how I've brought these together. In my hierarchy, I created an empty object called obstacles to house all these platforms, and I basically just created 8 of them in there and positioned them by hand to create these 2 very basic platforms to jump across. If we go ahead and play, these behave pretty much as we expect. You can jump on them and walk on them just as if they were the ground, and that's about it for now. Now, obviously this is about as basic as platforms get right now, but I think this will be a great foundation to build upon as I build out my levels. I'll be able to change the size and materials and shapes of these platforms to create some interesting challenges for the player. Very happy with the amount of progress I was able to make on those platforms in a very short amount of time this morning. Unfortunately, it's time to go to work now, so I'll have to drop things here, and hopefully next time we start up, we'll be working on pickups. It is now Wednesday morning, just shy of 6:30 a.m., and I'm about to kick off development of pickups. I was hoping to work on this yesterday, but I ended up having a really busy day at work, so just relaxed when I got home. Good news though, yesterday was our first snow of the season, which was really exciting to see. So for my very first pickup object, I just created this very simple prism and shaded it with kind of a reflective dark green to match the forest. And messing around with these colors has really made me realize that I need to pick out a color palette for Polar. Anyway, time to drop this into Unity and see what it looks like. So I created a prefab of my pickup item and dropped a few of these into the scene, and it's behaving just about as I expected. I think they actually look pretty nice. I had to tweak the color a little bit, but unfortunately nothing happens when you collide with them yet, and they just kind of float there completely static. They don't particularly look appealing to the eye, so next up I'm going to work on some idle animations for those guys and make something actually happen when the bear collides with them. Alright, everything seems to be working, so I'll go ahead and walk you through what I have done. I started out by creating this rotator script. Pretty simple. It takes in an axis and a rotation speed and basically just figures out how to apply a rotation vector to the transform of the game object that this is attached to. Once I attached that to my pickup prefab, I also added a box collider and a rigid body to this prism. Now, important to note about the box collider is that I've checked is trigger. What that means is that when the player collides with this particular object, it's not going to stop the player or have an effect on his physics. We're just going to pass right through it, which is of course what we want for a pickup. And finally, in my player controller within my little collisions region here, I added a call to onTriggerEnter. This is where I check the tag of whatever game object we collided with, and if it's a pickup, we go ahead and destroy it. So we're not actually collecting these items now, we're just destroying them so they disappear off the screen. Let's take a look at what that looks like. Now if we're just walking along, you can look up here and see that these are spinning. They look quite a bit nicer. And if we collide with these here on the ground, they will disappear. It's going on 7:30 now, and unfortunately I think that's all the time I have for development this morning, but I want to make an observation before I go. I think for this prototype, just having the pickups on the screen that you can collide with is not going to be enough. I want the player to be able to tell that something is actually happening when you pick up these items. So I'm planning to introduce some kind of UI or score system now in this prototype. Hopefully that's what we'll work on next. I'll catch up soon. Welcome back. It is Sunday afternoon around 3:45. It has been quite a handful of days since my last update. It's just been a busy week with work and family visiting, but today all that is wrapped up and I've got a little bit of time to work on Polar finally. Just got back from a great workout and knocked out some chores, and I'm ready to dive back in. There are two important pieces of functionality for my prototype that I want to wrap up in this devlog. The first is the end goal. Now that's going to be some kind of flag or basically just a trigger at the end of the stage to let me know that you've finished the stage, you made it to the end, and the round is over. The next thing is ability cooldowns, and after playing a lot with the functionality I've developed so far around sliding and dashing and jumping, I think I need to have a cooldown, especially for dash. Otherwise, you can just dash over and over again and go super, super fast. So that's going to be a little bit trickier of a system. Right now, we're going to start with the end goal and hopefully knock that out pretty quickly. Before I get started here, I want to mention that I have made some progress over the past few days on some basic UI for Polar, and this includes a score tracker as well as a timer. Now, these two things, in my mind, are going to combine to give you a rank at the end of each stage, basically A, B, C, or S if you did a really good job on the particular stage. And this is going to be obviously a combination of how quickly you completed the stage and how many points you accrued throughout by picking up those little pickup things that I designed earlier. This was not too tough to implement, but of course, if you're curious, I'm happy to answer more questions about it or make a tutorial. Just let me know. With that said, it is time to get to work on the end goal item and try to create some kind of object to put into the scene to signify that you've reached the end of the stage. I just had a cool idea for that. Rather than just a basic flag, I thought it would be kind of fun if the polar bear slid into a giant mound of snow and you had some particle effects coming out. So that's what I'm going to work on, and if I'm completely honest with you guys, it's probably just going to be me cutting this sphere in half and throwing that into Unity. So let's do it. So after just a few minutes, we have our beautiful mound of snow. Just as I expected, I was able to take a sphere and add a decimate modifier to it to decrease the number of faces and vertices here, and it looks pretty good, just like a little low poly pile of snow. I've added a rigid body to it and a sphere collider, which I have set as a trigger so that the polar bear will be able to enter this mound of snow. If we look back at our scene, you can see, it looks pretty cool. Now it's time to actually code this up and make all this stuff work. Alright, it took a little bit longer than I expected to hook all this stuff up, and unfortunately I'm not totally sold on the aesthetic of it, but it works, so I'll go ahead and show you what I came up with. If you look at our stage here, you'll see that I've kind of condensed everything towards the front for easier testing, and the new addition to the scene is this big, gnarly snow mound that looks more like an igloo, to be honest. We'll go ahead and play and take a look at what happens when the polar bear enters that mound of snow. So we'll go ahead and zoom over here, and once we get to the middle of that snow pile, we're going to hit the collider, which is going to trigger our little particle effect. Not timed up super well. Obviously, I have a lot of work to do there to make that look a bit nicer, but hopefully you see what I'm going for. And in terms of the functionality that happens when that trigger is activated, of course, the polar bear stops moving, and my timer has also stopped here. So these two things are frozen. No fancy effects yet to let you know that the game is over, but the trigger itself is working, so I'm pretty happy with that. Because that took a bit longer than expected, and it's been like a week and a half since I posted a video, I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the devlog here. We'll just save our work on the cooldown system for the next episode. However, I'm going to finish off this devlog just like I have the others by doing something cool to the scene to make the game just look a little bit cooler. I like doing this at the end of just doing a bunch of functional work throughout the week. You can probably already tell here, but I've done two things. I've changed the angle of my light source a little bit to make it look a little darker, and of course have added this enormous landscape in the background. Now this is just auto-generated with Blender's landscaping tool, and I applied a decimate modifier to create this cool low poly look. And if we go ahead and play, it's not perfect obviously with the plane here as the main playing field, but I think that just looks super cool. It adds so much depth to this game, and I don't know, it just looks really cool. I hope you guys like it too. To sum things up for the week, we started out by smoothing out our controls that we designed previously, and then we just created a bunch of individual entities that we're going to need to build out our first prototype stage. That included pickups, obstacles, a scoring mechanism, a timer, and the end goal to let us know that we have completed the stage. I think we made a bunch of progress towards just my ultimate goal of creating a first stage and figuring out whether this thing is fun to play or not. As always, I'd love to hear your suggestions in the comments. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.